All right. Well, welcome. My name is Cassie, and I am a conservation education specialist here at the Racine Zoo. So if you guys have attended some of these programs before, you probably met Ryan. He is our lead conservation education specialist. But I'm filling in today. So just a few things before we begin. You guys already have yourselves muted, so after each animal, if you guys would like to unmute and ask questions, or if you prefer to type them in the chat, that's fine too. I have the chat open, so any questions that pop up in the chat, I will answer. And yeah, so it's going to be about 40 to 45 minutes. I have 4 animals that we're going to be meeting today. I'll start with kind of the smaller one and work my way up to ones that are a little bit bigger. And yeah, I'd love to answer your questions if you guys have questions, and hopefully we have fun and learn about some really cool animals. Awesome. So I'm going to start with my first animal friend, and this is one that likes to hop. So just kind of think about what animals might hop. There's some mammals, some fuzzy ones that hop. There's also some scaly animals that kind of hop. There's some slimy ones. So I'm going to go ahead and get out my friend, whose name is Kermit. So if that name didn't give it away, this is my friend Kermit, and he is a marine toad. So just like all amphibians, frogs and toads actually breathe through their skin, which is why I'm going to leave him in his crate today, because if we try not to touch our amphibians, because they can actually get sick if you have anything on your hands. And like I said, he loves to hop. So we actually, on the top of his crate here, we have some bubble wrap in there to help protect him so he doesn't clunk his head, because he does tend to hop quite a bit. That's just what frogs and toads do. But yeah, his name's Kermit, after Kermit the Frog, even though he's technically a toad. So he is a marine toad, which is also known as the cane toad. These guys are native to Southern and Central America. However, these guys are actually an invasive species to Australia and lots of islands, because some people brought them over to kind of try to control the insect population, because these guys eat lots and lots of insects. But what happened was that they became invasive. They actually were eating too much. And then the native frog species and other animals that ate insects didn't have as much food. They also have a toxin in their body that can be very harmful to predators that try to eat them. So in their own native habitat in Southern and Central America, there's a lot of predators that might be immune to that, but where they're invasive, like in Australia, the predators aren't necessarily immune to that. So that can make the predators really sick. It can even cause death for some of them. So these guys, as an invasive species, they're actually not a good thing to have around. So this is one of our few animals that is not endangered at all. They're actually very invasive. Oh, he's turning around to look at me, so I'm gonna see if I can get him closer. Another super cool thing about these guys is, remember I said that they breathe through their skin. So frogs, toads, salamanders, newts, all those different amphibians, they have that slimy skin. He's hopping around here. And that slimy skin they use because they actually breathe through their skin. So they always need to be moist, even when they're adults. When they're babies, they're little tadpoles and they live entirely in the water, because these guys like the wetlands. When they get to be an adult, they can come out, so sometimes they'll live in grassland or forest areas, but they always need to stay near water to keep that skin wet. So you'll find them along ponds and rivers, as well as areas like under a log or a rock where the soil is nice and damp. And so they have to keep that skin wet so that they can breathe through it. That's why here in his crate, he's kind of pushed it aside a little bit, but there's a wet paper towel in there, and we give him some special amphibian water. And that's how he stays nice and moist while he's out on programs. Now, because they breathe through their skin, amphibians are actually really good what's called indicator species. So in their habitats, a lot of times scientists will look at the populations of frogs and toads, and if there's lots of frogs and toads, that means that the ecosystem is healthy. Why do you guys think that is? What would happen if maybe say there's pollution in the water? Does anyone want to chime in and take a guess? What do you think would happen if there was pollution in the water and the water was all icky? What would happen if these guys are breathing through their skin? Anyone want to chime in? I don't know if we have people who want to unmute, or if you guys want to just think about that for a minute, that's cool too. So these guys, what they will do is they can actually get really sick. So if they live near a pond and the water's really dirty, if there's chemicals from pesticide runoff, or even just if there's like just other things that are polluting the water, you know, sometimes people will throw away litter, and that eventually washes out to the different freshwater ponds and rivers. That can make these guys really, really sick because they're breathing through their skin and they're taking in those things from the water. So sometimes scientists will look, and if they notice that over time there's an ecosystem where there's not a lot of frogs and salamanders, there's just not as many as there used to be, that's a good indicator that there's a lot of water pollution and that it's not healthy. So these guys are super important for science. One thing we do here at the Racine Zoo is actually called Frog Watch. And it's a program that a lot of AZA zoos do, where you train people to go out in their local neighborhoods, and they actually go out, you just go out for like 10 minutes a night, a couple times a week in the summer, and you listen for frog calls. So the training involves learning the different frog calls in your area, and then you record that, and it's all online, so that way scientists can look and they can see, you know, us here in Racine, Wisconsin, at some of our local ponds, where are the, you know, what types of frogs are there, how many frogs are there, and that really helps us to get a better idea of what's going on with the ecosystem. So that's something a lot of places do. Here in Racine, like I said, we do that training at our zoo. We usually do that in the springtime in March or April if anyone's really interested in frogs. It's a really fun class. I attended it one year, and then you just pick a fun place to go out and you just sit there and listen to the frog calls, which I personally find frog calls really relaxing. I'm one of those that I like the nature sounds when I'm falling asleep at night, the frogs and crickets. And it's really cool to realize how unique these guys are. They all have different, some of them make a little chirping sound, some of them it's more of a trill, some of them it's a really, you know, like the typical like ribbit or croak. Kermit here, I've never really heard him make too much noise. He's, other than hopping around a lot, he's a pretty quiet guy. But yeah, another cool thing, Kermit here is 12 years old. Which actually in the wild, these guys only live to be up to 8 years old. And in human care, it's very hard to take care of amphibians. So they often don't even live that long when people take them home as pets. So it's really cool that he's 12. So he's an older guy. And as you can see, he's very active. So here at the zoo, he has an enclosure. He used to be in the Discovery Center, but now he's behind the scenes with our other education animals. And he has a little water dish that he likes to hop in and swim around in. And then he also has a lot of wet soil and substrate. His favorite thing to do is to dig next to his water dish, and he'll kind of go alongside there and kind of burrow down and sleep in the nice wet soil. And then when he comes out on programs like this, he's very curious, and so he's looking around, he's hopping, and he's just having a good time. Hi, Kermit. Oh, another thing I mentioned is some predators, these guys are toxic. So what they do is they actually, when they feel threatened, they can secrete a liquid out from their, kind of like by their back area, like the back of their shoulders. And when they do that, if predators try to eat them or take a bite, the predators, like I said, that can be very toxic. For people, it's not necessarily toxic, but it does make people hallucinate. So if you guys are ever in Southern or Central America, or if you're over in Australia, I do not recommend licking the frogs and toads because it can make you hallucinate, which is pretty crazy. Like I said, these guys eat insects. So here at the zoo, he likes to get crickets. Sometimes we'll give him mealworms. They really will eat any meat they can fit in their mouth, which is why they normally go for insects. He also, I've seen him get baby mice that he likes to eat too. And he'll just grab them and swallow them. Another super cool thing I'm going to mention real quick, if I can kind of get him up close here, is he does have webbed feet, which help him to swim. Oh, now he doesn't want to go up on the glass. So they do have webbed feet, so between their fingers and toes, they have that webbing, and that allows them to be able to swim around a little bit better. And then they have really, really strong back legs for hopping. So same with like rabbits and any animals that tend to hop, kangaroos, frogs. They tend to have really strong back legs because they're always hopping around. Awesome. Well, do you guys have any questions about my friend Kermit? And I think we just got one more person joining in here. So I'll give them a second to get in and they can see Kermit real quick. So we're just met Kermit the marine toad. So if anyone has any questions, you guys can type them in the chat, or if you would like to unmute and ask any questions about Mr. Kermit, who is our marine toad. All right, well, if you guys think of any questions too along the way, even if it's back to one of the animals we've already done, definitely feel free to type those in the chat and I will get to them at the end. But we're gonna go ahead and say goodbye to Mr. Kermit, and I'm gonna put him away. Thank you guys for meeting our awesome toad friend. Awesome. So we met Kermit, who is from, we said he's from Southern and Central America, and he is also invasive to Australia as well as other islands that people have brought them to. So what we're going to do next is meet an animal from Africa, and this one is kind of from the opposite of the wetlands. So I'm going to let you guys think about that for a second. What's the opposite of the wetlands over in Africa? And I'm going to go grab my next animal friend. Alrighty, so this friend has no arms or legs, and he is from the desert of Africa. So this is my friend Fossil, and Fossil is a Kenyan sand boa. So they're native to Kenya and other areas around there in Africa. Like I said, they're from the desert. So these guys, they're called a sand boa because they love to spend time under the sand. In fact, for a while, they were not very well studied because scientists had trouble finding them since they always spend all their time burrowed underneath the sand. So Fossil here, he is 23 years old. And so he is full grown. If you guys look, this is how long he is. So these guys can only get to be up to 18 inches to 2 feet long. They're a very small snake. They're also very, they're not super wide going around. And living in the desert, these guys have some really, really cool adaptations that help them to be able to survive there. So the first thing that most people notice is the color. So if you look, he's this really pretty brown and orange kind of tan color. And that helps him to camouflage to the sand because over there, the sand's kind of an orangey brown color. They also use a lot of really cool things specifically for living in the desert. So this guy, if you guys look at the front of his face, you'll notice it's not a typical snake-shaped face with that kind of, they have that, just a certain shaped head that snakes have. His is very round. He has a very round nose, not a lot of different curves going on there, and that's because he actually uses his face like a shovel. So what these guys will do is they will, when they're ready to burrow under the sand, they'll use that face and they'll just dig down and they can burrow under there really well.
It's showing the chats. I don't know. You want to type it on here, maybe?
Awesome. Oh, and we got a chat.
Oh, there you
go.
Did she? Okay.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. I see the chat. Let me answer these couple quick questions about the toad. Okay, do toads have teeth? I think they have something to chew with, but it's not necessarily teeth like we have. Like, it's not like they would like bite you with like teeth. Would they get sick? Okay, so yeah. Oh, I see now the chats. Sorry, guys. I had the chat closed before when we were looking at questions. Oh yeah, so the population of toads go down. So sometimes people do have these guys as pets. Oh, so the cane toad, so Kermit, he is a boy. It's very hard to tell with reptiles and amphibians, but our vet assumes that he's a boy. And then some people do have toads as pets. They're very, like I said, those ones are very common. They're not endangered. So those toads, yeah, some people probably do have them as pets, and it's one animal that is not harmful to the wild population to keep them as a pet because there's already too many of them out there. Awesome. Sorry, guys, I missed that in the chat. I'll try to keep this open so I can see it a little bit better. And back to our friend Fossil. So Fossil here, so we talked about his nose for digging in the desert. Another thing, I'm going to try to get him nice and close. If you guys see, his eyes are kind of more towards the top of his head than a lot of snakes. They're more on the sides. His are kind of more up. And that is because when he is hiding under the sand, he can pop just his eyes and his nose so that he can breathe. And he can sit at the surface of the sand and have his whole body hidden, which is good. That way he's hiding from both predators and prey. And then he can still see and breathe because this particular snake, they have those eyes as well as their nose positioned on the top of their head. Another thing you guys are going to see he's doing right now a lot is he's sticking his tongue out at you. Does anyone know why? I'll give you guys a second to answer this in the chat. Does anyone know what snakes do with their tongue? I'm guessing you guys have met a couple snakes already with Ryan if you guys have done a couple of these programs, but does anyone know what the snakes do with their tongue? What is he doing right now? He's sticking that tongue out. You guys will also see he has a forked tongue. It's kind of, instead of just being one piece like ours, that tongue has two forks, two parts. Yeah, someone got it. They said he smells with it. So yeah, so he's smelling the camera here, all of that. So what they do is snakes, they have a special organ on the roof of their mouth. It's called the Jacobson organ. So they'll stick that tongue out and they pick up all the scent particles in the air. And then when they pull it back in their mouth and they touch the roof of their mouth, that organ senses smell. The reason that it is a forked tongue is that it can pick up smells in both directions. So if you guys think about when you hear a loud sound, you can tell which direction it's in, right? Like if you're sitting on your couch and you hear a loud sound outside from, you know, the right or the left, you can kind of tell which way it's coming from because you have two ears, one on each side. So same thing with snakes' tongues. Because they have those two forks, they can smell in two different directions. So that can be really useful if they're trying to find food. They can smell their prey and they know which direction to go to find that. Or if they are running away from, not running, they don't have legs, but if they're slithering away from a predator and they can smell that and they know it's dangerous, they're gonna know not to go over there. So that's a really cool adaptation. I wish we could smell in different directions. I feel like when I smell, it's just smells like it's the same direction because it's all on the front of our face. So another super cool thing about snakes that kind of has to do with their mouth is they can eat food that is 3 times the size of their head. So what they do is they'll open their jaw really, really wide this way, as well as this way. They can actually, if you guys feel right here on your chin, if you feel there's a bone right here under your chin. So snakes actually have a gap right there. So they still have bone along the sides, but not right here. So they can actually open their jaw really wide this way as well. So it's not just the up and down, but also the sideways. They can open that mouth really wide. So that would be like if you guys were a snake and you could open your mouth that wide to swallow something 3 times the size of your head. That would be like swallowing a watermelon whole in one big gulp. So because of that, because they're taking in such big food, these guys don't need to eat. They don't eat 3 meals a day like we do. In fact, a lot of snakes, they only eat once a week, once every other week. Some of the bigger snakes that are taking in bigger meals, they might even eat every other month. So they don't need to eat quite as often since they have such a big meal and it takes some time to digest. In fact, our zookeeper was just telling me this morning that today is Fossil's day to eat. So he is going to get probably a little baby mouse when I bring him back. Another interesting fact is that snakes here at the zoo, we always feed them little, they're frozen, but then they're thawed little baby mice. And these guys, we don't want them to eat in their home, in their enclosure, because then they think, oh, like food. So they actually, Fossil here, a lot of our snakes have different containers or places they go when they're eating. So Fossil actually has a brown paper bag that he loves to hang out in, and that's where he eats his food. So he's gonna go get a nice tasty treat as soon as we're done here. And I think he's super excited about that. Do we have any questions about Fossil? I'll give you guys a second to type any questions about Fossil in the chat. Ooh, another thing is his name is Fossil because he likes to spend time under the sand, just like you think of dinosaur fossils, they're buried under the sand. So that's why we named him Fossil. Awesome, I'll give you guys a second to type some questions. Another really, really cool thing is if you guys have seen, he's kind of moving around a little bit as I'm holding him. A lot of people don't realize snakes actually do have bones. So throughout their whole back, they have, just like we have a backbone in our back and we have ribs in our sides, these guys have a backbone and they have ribs, and it's just really, really long. So if you think like we can kind of like move, we can kind of move like this, move our back, he can do that too, because he has all those bones, all those muscles. So that's how they slither, that's how they get around, since they don't have legs. Do male sand boas live longer than females? You know, I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, they're even on like our fact sheets here at the zoo. So when I first started working here a few years ago, it actually said on our fact sheet that these guys can only live to be 10 years old, but he was 19 at the time. And so since then we've kind of updated it, and we think now they can live up to 10 in the wild, but in human care up to 30. But for a long time, scientists just didn't really know much about them because they're so hard to find in the wild. They're always buried under the sand, so it's not like scientists can just go study them and follow them around all day, because they're always hiding. But yeah, so he is now 23, and we think that they can get to be up to 30 in zoos or as pets. And these guys, I'm not sure if there's a difference between males and females, to be honest. I don't think there is, not that I've heard, but it could just be something that scientists haven't discovered quite yet. There he goes, sticking his tongue out at you again. Awesome. Well, if you guys think of any more questions, feel free to type them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to put Mr. Fossil away. And our snakes at the zoo here, they actually like to travel in pillowcases. So I'm putting them in a little pillowcase and tying them up. That's to make them feel safe, kind of like being in a sleeping bag. It makes them feel nice and safe. And it also keeps him from escaping, because if he was in a container, he could, snakes are really strong. They have all those muscles along their body, so they could actually potentially escape if they were just in a crate, kind of like Kermit's crate that we saw earlier. So I'm going to put Mr. Fossil away. All right, so we saw Kermit from the wetlands of Central and South America. We met Fossil, who is from the desert of Africa. My next animal is also from Africa, but this one doesn't live in the desert. This one lives more so like in the grasslands and under bushes and places like that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to step away from the camera for a second to get her out, and we're going to see who our next animal friend is. All right. All right, she is sleeping. I'm going to go ahead and get her out. She is such a shy girl. Hello. Hello. All right. So this here is my friend Minx. And Minx is a North African hedgehog. Oh, this is so cool. You guys get to see a nice up close view of her. So Minx as a hedgehog, the first thing that a lot of people notice about her is those spines. You guys can see they cover her whole back. The only place she doesn't have spines is on her belly. And that's okay, because if she was scared of a predator, she would curl up into a ball, and that would protect her little belly from any harm. Now, I'm wearing gloves because they are a little bit pokey. They're not super sharp, but her spines, they kind of feel like toothpicks. So if you ever touched a toothpick, it's not sharp. It's not going to hurt you, but it's kind of pokey. So she has all those pokey things all along her back. They are made out of keratin, which is the same thing that your hair and fingernails are made out of. And these guys are mammals. It's just that instead of having fur on their backs, they have spines. You guys will also notice her little nose keeps sniffing around. That is because these guys, they use their sense of smell a lot. These guys can smell food, insects and worms for up to 2 inches under the ground they can smell. So they have a really, really strong sense of smell. They also have big ears. If you guys see her ears, those ears can hear really well. And then she has teeny tiny beady little eyes. And those little eyes she actually doesn't use. Oh, she's showing you her spines. The eyes she doesn't really use as much because these guys are nocturnal. So because they're nocturnal, that means that they are awake at night. So because it's dark, she doesn't really use her eyes a lot. She'll use her sense of smell and sense of hearing. And that's how she gets around. That's how she smells food. And that's just what hedgehogs do. Now, some people do have hedgehogs as pets, which is part of the reason that their populations are declining. These guys are also, like I said, they're nocturnal, so they can keep you up at night. If you have them as a pet, you just gotta do some good planning, make sure that they come from a sustainable source and that they're not taken from the wild. Another thing is these guys poop a lot. Now, I don't know if Ryan showed you Minx before, if she pooped on camera, but Minx is our #1 pooper here at the zoo. Almost every time I do a program with her, she poops, so I wouldn't be surprised if she does that. Another really common question I get is about these guys, why they're called a hedgehog, and that's because they like to live under hedges. So someone just said it's a hedgehog, it's a hog. Hogs are, like a pig, they smell a lot. So someone thought she kind of, I guess, resembled a pig or a hog in the way that she's always smelling with that nose. And then they decided that because she lives under hedges, they were going to call them hedgehogs. Minx here is 2 years old. We actually adopted her. She was one that was someone's pet and they didn't want her anymore. And so we adopted her here at the zoo. She's 2 years old, and she's about average size for a hedgehog. When we got her, she was actually a little overweight. She had been overfed. But just like all of our animals here at the zoo, we make sure that they have the healthiest diet possible so that they stay nice and healthy. Awesome. And if you guys have any questions about Minx, you guys can start typing them in the chat. She is loving these virtual programs. She's one that can be a little bit shy because she is a little bit newer to our animal ambassadors. And because she does have such a good sense of hearing, sometimes if people are very, very loud, she can get a little bit nervous. So I think she's really liking doing these virtual programs. Hi, Minxie. They also have teeny tiny little claws. They'll sometimes dig. Like I said, they can smell food for up to 2 inches under the ground. So then what they'll do after they find it is they can use those little tiny claws to dig it up. How long do hedgehogs live? So actually in the wild, they only live to be 2 years old. So if she was in the wild, she would be very, very old. But with people, they can sometimes live to be 6 to 8 years old. So because she's living here at the zoo, she'll probably get to be 6 to 8 years old. But in the wild, a lot of times because predators can eventually get them, obviously those spines that helps them, oh, here she's showing you. So those spines help them, if you think, like I said, they're not super sharp, they're just kind of pokey. But if she was to curl into a ball and an animal tried to take a bite of her, do you think that would feel too good? Imagine taking a bite full, if you had a big ball covered in toothpicks sticking out at you. Would that taste very good if you took a bite of some toothpicks? No, that would not feel good. And you probably wouldn't do it again. If an animal did try to take a bite of her, they probably would know not to do that ever again because it probably wouldn't feel too good. So that really helps protect them. But every once in a while, predators do get to them. And so that's why they don't live quite as long in the wild. Also because people sometimes do take them for the pet trade. So that is one of the reasons why these guys, I don't know, they're not critically endangered, but their populations are declining because of people taking them home as pets. Awesome. Well, I'm going to put Miss Minxie away. We'll say goodbye, Minx. If you guys think of any other questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. There you go, sweetie. Another thing about her is she loves her blankie. So in her enclosure, she has a blanket that she loves to hide under. So whenever we bring her out for programs, we have to give her her blankie in her crate. So it makes her feel nice and safe. Awesome. All right, guys. So we have met 3 of our 4 animals. I have one more animal for us to meet, and it's a really, really cool one. So I'm going to go ahead and get him out. This animal is actually from the rainforest. It loves to live up in the trees. So take a second and think, what kind of animal might live up in the trees? If you guys have a guess, go ahead and put it in the chat. What's going to live up in the treetops? And I'm going to go get him out. Alrighty. So, daughter guess. Oh, how long do hedgehogs live? I answered that. Tree boa. Ooh, good guess. We do have some green tree pythons here at the zoo, but it's not not a tree boa. A bird. Ooh, that's another guess. So great guesses, guys. Those are both animals that live in trees. So today I actually have my friend Harley, who is a prehensile tailed skink. So he is a type of lizard. I'm going to kind of show you guys the back. So he is a type of lizard. Skinks, there's a whole bunch of different skinks. They're part of the lizard family. And he specifically is a prehensile tailed skink because he has this long tail we're going to talk about in just a minute. So skinks, they're known, they kind of have this like triangle shaped face, as you guys can see. Now Harley here, he came to the zoo. He is about, I believe he's actually, his birthday's coming up. He's going to be 5 on December 1st. And these are the largest species of skink. There are other skinks that live on the ground and live different places, but this particular kind is made for living in trees. So they live on the Solomon Islands, which is a set of islands right off the coast of Australia. And that's the only place in the world that these guys are native to. And they live in the rainforest and they stay way up in the tops of trees because that's where they feel safe. So he has some really cool adaptations that help him to live up there. So I'm going to see if I can kind of show you guys. So first of all, he has these sharp claws, which is why I'm wearing gloves. It's not because I'm scared he's going to hurt me, but because he has these really strong claws. And those help him to be able to grab branches as he's climbing, just like he's holding on to me. He also has that prehensile tail. So the word prehensile means grasping. So he'll use this tail to grasp branches, just like if it was another arm or leg. So as he's climbing in the forest, or even here at the zoo in his exhibit, he has lots of branches he'll climb on. So between using his arms and legs and those little claws and that long tail, he will grab onto things to help him stay steady as he's climbing. These guys are a type of lizard that eats only plants, so he likes to eat fruits and leaves and even flower petals that he can find up in the trees. And he has to be able to hide from predators because, like someone guessed, a bird or a snake, those animals also live up in the trees. So he needs to be able to hide because a nice big bird that might try to eat him or a snake might try to eat him. So what he does is he has camouflage. So if you guys see, he's this nice, pretty green color. So he's green to help camouflage. He also is very good at, kind of staying still and waiting for his, he doesn't really have to chase food, so he can just kind of sit there and munch on leaves. So he's very good at hiding from any predators that might try to eat him. Awesome. Another thing is he's not really doing it too much right now, but a lot of lizards, they actually do stick their tongue out and smell with it, just like snakes do. He's not doing it too much. Sometimes when I bring him out, he'll stick his little tongue out at everybody to try to smell. A fun fact is a group of prehensile tailed skinks is actually called a circus. So a whole group of these guys would be called a circus of skinks. I thought that was a funny word. And these guys are reptile, just like all lizards. They are reptiles. Oh, there's his tongue. Aw, he's giving us a good example here of that tongue. Yeah. Aw, what a sweetie. I think he likes you guys. So what these guys will do, even though they're a reptile, they have scales. They do shed their scales just like snakes do. He actually just got done shedding a couple days ago. These guys, one difference though than other reptiles is most reptiles lay eggs, but this particular type of skink actually has live birth. So they don't lay eggs, they just have their babies. And they've been known to even be a little bit aggressive towards other animals right when they do give birth, and they are a little bit protective over those babies for the first little bit. Awesome. So if you guys have any questions about my friend Harley, feel free to go ahead and type those in the chat. So Harley here, I said he's about to be 5 years old in a couple weeks. He's been at the zoo since he was maybe a year or two old. He is one that he loves, because he's from the rainforest, he loves when it's warm out. So he's liking being indoors right now. But in the summer, sometimes we'll bring him outside for people to meet too, because he loves when it's hot and humid. That is his type of weather. He doesn't really do good in the cold. Awesome. I got another question. I thought only mammals give live births. So yeah, so usually that is a characteristic. Almost always mammals give live births. Other animals lay eggs. But there are a few exceptions, and these guys are one of those few exceptions. And believe it or not, there's actually also some mammals that lay eggs, like the platypus and some like that. So there's always those weird exceptions to the rules. Right when we think we know how to sort animals and what is what, and then there's always those weird exceptions. Great question. Awesome. Here he goes. He's showing you his little claws. Awesome. Cool. Well, oh, one more thing is, oh, there he goes with this little tongue. These guys are crepuscular, which we talked about how the hedgehog was nocturnal, how she was awake at night. And then animals that are awake during the day are called diurnal. But this type of animal is crepuscular. Does anyone know what the word crepuscular means? I'll give you guys a second to think about it. So crepuscular are animals that like to stay awake during dusk and dawn. So they sleep a little bit at night and they sleep a little bit during the day, but they're most active right away in the morning at dusk and then right at night as the sun's going down. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and put Mr. Harley away. Say bye, Harley. He says bye. Awesome. All right, so that was the last animal that I have for you guys. So I hope we kind of covered a lot of things. We saw an animal from the rainforest. We had our friend Fossil, the snake from the desert, Hedgehog from the wetlands. We saw Kermit, the toad from the wetlands. And then we saw, the Hedgehog from the grasslands. So yeah, lots of cool animals. So we do have a couple minutes left. So if anyone does have any last questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat, or if you would like to unmute. Otherwise, feel free to log off whenever you are ready. I'm super excited I got to do a virtual program for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed meeting the animals. I think the animals had a lot of fun too. And so yeah, thank you guys so much.